Um, my name is 𝗕𝗲𝗶𝘀𝗄𝗯.
I'm 𝗕𝗲𝗶𝘀𝗶𝗲. We are the co-artistic directors of Fourth Wall Theater Company. We're glad you could join us. Our guest today is Dr. Rob Shimko, who has a couple of titles. I'll do my best. He's the director of the School of Theater and Dance at University of Houston. He's also, I believe the term you just said was director of the Houston Shakespeare
Executive
Festival.
Director
Executive
of the
Director.
Houston Shakespeare Festival.
Welcome, Rob.
Thanks. It's great to talk to you. I'm glad to be a part of this interview series.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I think we should start by talking about what is exciting at either U of H School of Theater and Dance or Houston Shakespeare Festival.
Yeah,
where
great.
do you start?
So, of course, we're talking in first part of May in 2021. So we are, sort of still in COVID pandemic conditions. This past year, and I'll kind of answer School of Theater and Dance, and then I'll answer Houston Shakespeare Festival a little bit separately. This past year in the school, we did literally twice as many shows as we would do in a typical year, largely because, well, for two reasons. One, we were not constrained by space. So because they were online, sort of Zoom shows, there was, the laws of physics that prevent us from rehearsing two plays in one room or running two shows in one theater at the same time didn't apply. And so it was a matter of, okay, well, we really could, like, for example, in the fall, we do a full-length new play that comes out of the BFA playwriting program. So another hat that I wear is I'm the head of the BFA playwriting program. That's our undergrad playwriting program. And my partner in running that is 𝗕𝗲𝗶𝘀𝗶𝘀𝗶, a great American playwright. And so Teresa in the junior year works with undergraduate playwrights in that program. And at the end of that term, sort of basically right around now, in fact, we just settled on the script for the coming fall. Teresa and I sit down and look over what the students have written in their junior year, and we select one of the plays for a production. And the other ones get stage readings with casts. And so normally that's the way we do it, and that's what we'll be getting back to in the fall semester. This past fall, so fall of 2020, we said, let's just do all of them. So we ended up doing 3 plays instead of one play. That's because great. Again, there was no scheduling issue. And the other thing is, we were very cognizant of the fact that the students, if they're not doing plays, even if they were online plays, and of course, I'm very aware right now in May, after doing online theater for more than a year, our students are ready to get back to doing live theater in the fall, which is what we intend to do. And we're going to come back with a live season in the coming school year. But going into it, we knew that they just needed the structure of a rehearsal process and to have a, if they're a stage manager, to have a have a show they're responsible for. If they're an actor, to be responsible for that. If they're a student dramaturg, to have those responsibilities, design, etc. It was an interesting challenge for like sound designers, for example. And so we were just a buzz with energy in the school, even though it was diffuse, even though there were not that many in the building, in the University of Houston School of Theater and Dance building on a day-to-day basis. There were, dancers working in parking garages. There were folks out doing, filming things outside in different parts of the city and different parts of the campus. And so we ended up with a season that I'm really, really proud of. And we, on a practical level, like we had to buy new digital storage stuff because we have these huge, like we basically made movies. And with and a shout out to a colleague of ours in the Valenti School of Communications, who's a professor named 𝗕𝗲𝗆𝗃. Keith is the person who helped us with all of the recording and especially the editing. And we learned a lot about editing, like digital editing techniques of how to put the plays together. So we got, we really got into some deeper partnerships on the technology and the filming side as well. which are actually looking like they're going to last well into the future. We had some curriculum changes, like changing the amount of acting for the camera work that we do, and increasing the number of, like on-camera opportunities. And I think some of the students who put their reels together this year, like their film and TV reels, and commercial reels, they look great. They've got, so it actually, we tried to make, lemonade out of any lemon that we found.
Yeah.
So all of that in mind, we are still going back to normal, so to speak, in the fall with with a season that will be in theaters with we're still we're still waiting to see what Actors Equity says about masking and all of that, and we do try and follow the rules of of the professional organizations and be responsible to that. But we are going into the 2021-2022 school year with the intention of being back physically in theaters.
Yeah.
Can you share what titles you're going to do, or do you know yet?
Yeah. So we're doing, in the fall, we're doing Our Lady of 121st Street, an author that y'all know and like very well.
Yes.
And we've got a Chicago-based director with some Houston connections, both art department and Houston Shakespeare Festival, named 𝗕𝗲𝗶𝘀cie and that will be our lead-off show. So 𝗕𝗲𝗶𝘀cie will be flying in from Chicago to direct Our Lady of 121st Street. We have Brandon Weinbrenner over from the Alley directing Picnic as our sort of American classic.
That's great.
I had mentioned earlier that we have a fall new play, a student-written play that comes out of the playwriting program that Teresa Rebeck and I decide on. I just announced to the playwrights today that we've got a student named 𝗕𝗲𝗶𝘀𝗀𝗏 who is again a rising senior, and she's got a play, sort of a coming of age story, immigrant story, called How I Learned to Play Tennis. And one of our adjunct faculty members, Philip Kershaw, will be directing that. And then my colleague Jessica Ferrarone, who teaches freshman acting and is the head of our MA for theater education program, will be directing another playwright that you guys are fond of and who I've actually become friends with, Willie Knows Middletown.
Yeah.
And then of course and the fall will end as always with our dance show.
Right.
So that's the fall.
That sounds wonderful. That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a nice mix of titles, good mix of directors, and the old and the new. Yeah.
That's great.
That sounds fantastic. So, so what about the Houston Shakespeare Festival?
Sure. So
in the summer, as we
so last summer we were on hiatus. As you know, our venue for the Shakespeare Festival is Miller Outdoor Theater, and we're responsive to what Miller Outdoor Theater can do, but also it's a heavy rehearsal situation with a very large cast. Again, the Miller stage is huge, so we tend to use a lot of actors for the Shakespeare Festival, as you know. And so this time last year, if you think back to where everybody was a year ago, we were just like, oh, I don't know, we just knew we couldn't rehearse and produce a festival, so we didn't do anything last year. This coming summer, we're still not fully back. We're doing sort of a bridge of programming. We're doing a film festival called Shakespeare Night at the Movies.
Oh.
And so we're doing, for example, the Baz Luhrmann R&J. We're doing Akira Kurosawa's Throne of Blood, the Kenneth Branagh Henry V. So we haven't made our season announcement yet, so here's a preview of some of the titles. But so we'll do, and people who know the Miller Outdoor Theater venue know that they show movies as part of what they normally do.
Sure.
And so instead of just showing movies, we're going to try and surround it with the festival atmosphere. In a quote unquote normal year, I will do a pre-show talk before Richard III or Hamlet or whatever, and I'll talk for half an hour and give a sort of mini theater history lesson, things to look for in the production and all that. And so I'll be doing that for each of the movies this year. So there will be a live component. We'll still have some of our our folks out there. I'll be out there doing a curtain speech and telling my usual bad jokes from the stage before the movie start, and doing some pre-show lecturing and all of that. But that's the current year, and then in 2022 we'll be back with a full-fledged season. And for us, again, for people who have not attended the Shakespeare Festival, or if it's kind of new on your radar, we do 2 Shakespeare plays in repertory over 2 weeks. So alternating night to night. It's the same company of actors. So if you see them one night, you'll see them in whatever role they're playing, or whatever couple of roles, because we sometimes double in Shakespeare. Then you see the next night and you'll see a totally different play, and you'll see them going into a different set of roles. Again, it's 2022, we haven't announced yet, but for people who are big HSF fans, I will say that if you caught the season announcement in that brief window in 2020 before we canceled it, it might look a lot like the season that we were going to do last summer.
Oh, do we have a slide for that, Miss Catherine? Potentially?
Googleable?
Oh, maybe we have a little picture of what was going to happen. Nope, maybe not. All right, I thought we did. All right.
So yeah, I mean, the idea is that we had a bunch of people already set to do shows a couple of years ago, and we're trying to honor all of those commitments.
Yeah, I thought we had a publicity photo for what you were set to do.
Sure.
Because I think I know. Yeah, but oh, she deleted it. Look, there she is. Oops, I just deleted it.
Well, never mentioned this.
Well, now they have to go look for themselves.
Just look for yourself.
Yeah.
So we film festival this summer with, again, a kind of live outreach, and it's not, I should note that the Houston Shakespeare Festival does a lot of things that are not only the shows out at Miller Outdoor Theater. For example, we've got a long-term partnership with the Houston Public Library System. And so as it's part of their Camp STREAM, STREAM, Science, Technology, Reading, STRE would be engineering from STEM, R would be reading, and M would be math. So STEM plus reading and arts. Yeah.
That's great.
Cool.
So we do that. We also have been doing some like video content for Houston area schools. And that was, because we got, I mean, y'all might have been in this, I'm talking sort of behind the scenes a little bit from the producer's angle, but maybe, you were in a similar situation. We certainly got at least one grant for the festival as we normally would have done it. And then we were like, we're canceling the festival, but we're planning on doing this other stuff instead. Is that okay? And that, the one granting organization was like, yeah, we're not going to take the money back. So what would you do with it instead? And so we've got this series of things where HSF company actors would do like contrasting versions of monologues and scenes. So you might see the
slide, Catherine.
Yeah. Okay. So for example, you've got one role performed by 2 different actors. So you've got Meg Rogers and Constance Swain. UHPATP, that's University of Houston Professional Actor Training Program. So they're both alums. You can see they graduated a year apart, so they were in school around the same time. So you could see Meg and Constance do this, like a chunk of the same role, and then sort of, then you can talk about the interpretation of choices, and like, why would you approach it this way versus why would you approach it that way? And so that's an example of some of the stuff that we did in order to, for one thing, keep actors employed. I mean, I know that paying theater professionals is a big thing for Fourth Wall that everybody in our community, thinks is, our hats off to you for that. So we tried to be like, oh my God, all these folks had contracts canceled. Maybe we can put them to work in the digital realm for educational programming and do things that way.
Yeah.
I think you know this, Rob, but I do like to mention that Houston Shakespeare Festival is dear to me because I was living up in College Station, not knowing what the heck I was doing with my life. And I drove down one day in 2001 and auditioned for Sidney Berger and Ruddy Cravens. And it was my first job in Houston. I got to do Romeo and Juliet and King John that year. And it really got me a nice toehold in the Houston community. I saw.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It was, the festival will turn 50 in 2024. And
Mhm.
so we're coming back in summer of 2022, and then 23 and 24 will be the 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
Um, and we're going by years since it's, like, I guess somebody could say, well, you didn't do it, didn't do a festival in 2020.
Right.
But 50 years is 50 years, and I think, COVID canceled a lot of things. I think we've got to be,
Yeah.
generous about that. But yeah, so the 50th anniversary of the festival is coming up. And so, yeah, it is, it's really something to kind of get excited about. And so we'll be doing, we're thinking a lot about like what that season's going to look like. And we'll of course be doing some, some fundraising to try and make it an extra special 50th anniversary season.
Sure.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
Go ahead,
well, I
go
was
ahead.
going to say that, that's, you do, of course, what you do at U of H is amazing. And that's where I met you, finishing my degree.
Right, you were taking theater history 1
Yeah.
or 2. I forget which it was. Or
Right.
maybe,
Well, I was back to finish my 4-year degree because I had a 2-year and then I had 2 different conservatories out in New York. So I was like, well, someday I should come visit my mom, finish my degree.
right. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I totally remember you in one of the theater history classes, maybe
Oh,
both.
yeah. I think I took both. I think I had to take both, but I don't
You
remember.
asked a lot of questions. I remember you asked a lot of questions, and I like that because nobody likes to teach to a kind of quiet. Well, maybe some people like to teach to a quiet room. I don't like to teach.
Oh, no, but your classes are so fun. You always do wonderful projects where people have to actually perform and interpret
Right,
work.
yeah.
And that's always so much fun for a student who's in the theater. And even the few students who weren't really theater majors who just took it as an elective and really got to enjoy themselves. And I think it was really fun for everybody.
Yeah,
Um,
that
yeah.
theater history, where I went to school, Drake University, I loved those classes, but they were not in any way performative or interactive. And I mean, I didn't know that
Yeah.
about your classes because I
I
hadn't
guess
talked to
we
Kim
didn't talk
about
about
them. But that's great that you do that because I was kind of a nerd, and a lot of theater students are not nerds. They want to be there to act, and so theater history was tough for those people. So
Yeah.
it.
It's one of those things that, I'm very cognizant of a lot of like pedagogical theory and like just how to teach. And, I did a lot of training when I was in graduate school for like how to teach different kinds of learners, that sort of thing. And so, yeah, I do miss the live group project aspect where people create, take what they've researched and basically everybody does a research paper and then they have to get together and take their research and put it into a larger bucket of something performative.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm glad you remember that fondly because
Oh, I
that's
do.
one of my favorite things about the class too.
Well, I remember everybody loved it. And I remember that as an actor, one of the things that I always thought was so important about what you do, and just to toot your horn a little bit about what a great actor teacher you are, teacher for actors, in theory and in history, is that what actors don't always remember when they're working as an actor and they're young, right? I was a little older, so I understood this a little bit, but is how important understanding where acting began and the steps and and everything and how it's built on each other and how
Right.
The Greeks are the foundation of every kind of playwriting that's ever evolved. And if you don't understand that, the depth of what you do is not as fulfilled and is not as rich and not as full if you don't even understand the theory and the history of how everything began and how it built on each other. That's really important.
If you don't mind, that reminds me of something that I really love, which is when my little light bulb. So I guess I'm framed such that there literally looks like there's a light bulb above my head.
There is, yes, that's nice.
But I like one big revelation I had. This was years and years ago, but like when you learn about Thespis in school, like in high school, you take an English class and you do a unit on Greek tragedy, and they have you read Oedipus Rex, and then in the little one paragraph in the book it says the first actor was Thespis, and they always even use the same phrasing, which I don't know where they're getting it, but probably one article or book 150, 200 years ago, and it just has been a game of telephone. but he's stepped out of the chorus, and then and that I'm like that always struck me as weird, because that's, for one thing, that's not a good scene partner. Because it sounds like you're you came to do something called 𝗕𝗲𝗆, which is like the choral narrative singing form that preceded tragedy and drama and all of that. And it sounds like he just went, I'm going to start talking like do my own thing. And I think there's something lost in translation there, because the important thing about Thespis is not just that he was an actor, but we know that he was a playwright. He was one of the earliest, generation of playwrights. And we know that because they had competitions, and it was a civic event. And so there were sort of municipal records of, who wrote the plays and all that. So the interesting thing about Thespis is not like this improv, I'm going to do my own thing. But it's that if you think about the way that we narrate things, there's sort of three modes of speech: first person, second person, and third person. And so the sense is that storytelling, as it was done in what was called the dithyrambic chorus, this kind of choral narrative form that pre-existed theater. Give me an excuse to do a mini theater history lesson, and I'll just take it.
Keep going, man. I'm loving it.
So, but that the sense is that was in a third person. So let's say we're sort of chanting, singing about Apollo, and so Apollo did this, and Apollo did that, and so we'll tell you the things that Apollo did, and we'll basically present it in third person. So think back to your English class, first person and third person, all that. It's possible also that because there was this sense that the gods might have been sort of spoken to during these, religious festivals, it's possible that they might have also used a second person form of address where they spoke to Apollo instead of about Apollo. So there might have been some second person address. You, Apollo, were awesome for doing these things. But the interesting thing about Thespis is not this stepping out of the chorus business, which, again, the more you think about it, the more sort of nonsensical it seems. The way he separates himself from the chorus is a rhetorical separation, and which I mean shifting the mode in which you speak as a performer, shifting to I, first person. So what, the sort of thespian innovation in that sense is to pretend to be the character rather than speaking to or about the character. And in fact, that's what makes, in a drama sense, that's what makes a character, is to be, right? To quote a tiny bit of Shakespeare, right? Or the magic if, as if I were Apollo or Oedipus or Medea or whoever. And so that's the sort of thing that I think when you say that it's sort of theater history that might be actor friendly, or I would also like to think designer friendly or director friendly or playwright friendly. It's about not taking the really basic fundamental things for granted, but actually dwelling on the assumptions and poking at them a little bit. Like, what is, if this person Thespis did something first, and we call it the original instance of acting as we understand it, what really is that? Well, that doesn't act, like when you ask somebody like, well, what is acting? They don't say, well, it's separating yourself from the chorus. It's definitely from the chorus. Like, that's not what the person on the street would answer if you asked them what acting was. They would probably say something along the lines of, it's pretending to be someone who is not you. It's pretending to be a character as if you were them, speaking as them.
Yeah, to me, it's also the other thing, to take it another step further, what you're talking about, which I think about, like I'm saying, building the foundation of everything builds a foundation of everything else, is what he did is when you take it to it's a change for an audience. The audience goes from listening to a narration of something being educated. They feel like they're being educated, to their suspension being disbelief that something isn't happening in real time.
Yeah,
So that's what you all of a sudden go, oh, this is real. This is really happening. And this man is having this experience, and I'm supposed to respond to it in a manner instead of contemplate it as information being fed to me that I get to think about and be told. There's
There's this
experience.
wonderful term that both Plato and Aristotle used, and they used it totally differently because Plato was sort of skeptical and often negative about it, and his student Aristotle really rehabilitated it, but it's this word mimesis, M-I-M-E-S-I-S, mimesis, which is in Plato's understanding, and I can wrap up after this with the theater history stuff. This delightful list of questions about like the first play I ever saw, and so I don't want to answer those too. But the thing about mimesis, and I'll put it this way: just last week I taught my last theater history class of the semester, and we were doing because it's still theater history, so it's not totally contemporary. We were doing plays from the late 20th century, a play from Argentina called Information for Foreigners, which is this very political piece, a play from China called The Other Shore. Yeah, you remember that play.
Those
I remember you
plays are phenomenal. I even told you once I wanted to do Information for Foreigners in our space.
Yeah, you still should.
I know.
So we were doing that play. We were doing a play by Václav Havel, the great Czech playwright, a play called Temptation. We were doing a South African play called Mozart Albert. And even though we were in the late 20th century by that point, we were still talking about mimesis. We would talk about 𝗕𝗲𝗆𝗀𝗶𝗀𝗏, and we would talk about mimesis. We would talk about Brecht, and we would talk about mimesis, because what we fundamentally still do is theatrical mimesis, which is either, for Plato, and this is what I was going to say a second ago, for Plato, it's imitation. It's sort of a step down the way, like, imitation cheese is. We have both real cheese and imitation cheese. And one is the real, and one is the imitation of the real. Yeah. And so Plato would say that, like an actor pretending to be somebody is deception and a less than and a diminishment of existence and certainly a diminishment of our understanding, because we're not watching the truth. We're watching something imitative and fake. And it was Aristotle in the Poetics who says, no, there's actually something great about. I mean, he didn't talk like that, but
right.
As far as we can tell. I don't have a time machine, but there was this sense that, and this, by the way, is made totally new to me again by having a 6-month-old in the house. My wife and I have a 6-month-old named Bennett, and he's doing like sort of some of the things that Aristotle said, which is he's starting to realize that, what is real and what is the imitation of a real thing. Mm-hmm. Like Aristotle said, look at the way children interact with the world. Nobody needs to teach them to pretend. Nobody needs to teach them the difference between being and, in actuality and pretending. And as he gets older and starts to play Firehouse or whatever he plays, or pretends to, he really is interested in our dog right now. So at some point he might pretend to be the dog, right? In that way that kids play pretend. And it was Aristotle who said, because Aristotle's big thing was that nature is wise. And if you look at the way nature unfolds in natural processes, that's the way to figure things out. And you just need to have an organized way of understanding the natural world. And of course, that's why eventually, science owes a lot to some of what Aristotle originally thought. So there's this idea that pretending to be something teaches you. And that's to me where things really open up and stay opened up for this weird job that we all do, like writing plays and directing and designing and stage managing and acting in plays. It's not just fooling people. It's that it is a way of telling the truth, and it can be a way of teaching. And that is, that's a big enough thought that it can be Aristotle's version or Brecht's version or 𝗕𝗲𝗆𝗀𝗆𝗆's version or a million other people's versions, and open to open to being like, well, here's what I want to show you by pretending to be in a situation, whatever that situation might be.
Yeah.
So I want to shift gears a little bit because you mentioned a question that you wanted to answer, and I'll
sure.
make it a little broader. So, by the way, I expect this to be in the first person. What is it that got you into theater as a little kid, or was it or was it something else?
Yeah. So I mean, I'll answer a couple of ways. I loved stories before anything. Like I loved picture books, and I have a very distinct memory actually of, and I think I was young. I was like 3 or 4 years old, but a precocious little kid. But so I was born at the very end of 1975. So this is the very late 70s. But I was at the grocery store with my mom, a little older than a toddler, maybe 4. But there was like a rack of magazines and like, like the Word Find and crossword puzzle books and all that. And then there was a little plastic wrapped collection of 3 comic books. And just the colors were like, I was, and I was like, and they put it down with a kid height. And I, grabbed it and can I have this? And it was 3 like late 70s Fantastic Four comics. And I would say read. I did get an interest in reading, partly because my mom was a second grade teacher, and we did the flashcards and like learn to read. But I also wanted to know what was in those little balloons, in those little boxes that the colorful characters on the page were saying. And so I was really eager to learn to read, to also see what was being said. And so it's funny. My mom tells this story of me again around maybe 4, maybe 5, of her and another one of her elementary school teacher friends. Like her friend was over and they were having coffee at the kitchen table in the summer, and her friend was like on a theme of like, you shouldn't let kids watch TV. It'll watch their brain. It'll rot their brain and everything. And my mom was like, "Oh yeah, I never let Robbie watch TV, like an hour a week at most, And then of course I walk in talking about all of my favorite TV shows, and it's like it's clear that I watched like a lot of TV at the, and so and my mom told me that when I was in college studying theater, and she was like, "Yeah, well, it's kind of the writing was on the wall early." But yeah, so I had before I was bitten by the theater bug, I loved stories and adventures. I when I was a little older, like in 6th grade or so, those choose your own adventure books that were very popular in the 80s. And if you choose this, you go to page 49, and if you choose that, you go to page 75. And I had loads of those and just read them voraciously. So I guess it makes sense that when I did end up in theater, it was as a dramaturg and a historian and a playwright, and on that end of things, because I came to it really through a love of reading and storytelling first. But the first play that I was ever involved in, and I'm from a small college town in upstate New York, like all the way upstate, so not like an hour out of New York City, but like a close, like an hour from Montreal, like on the border.
Oh yeah.
So and my town, there was there's a college, state college, and there's a theater program. But we didn't go see plays. There was not there's not a professional theater in town. So I didn't have a lot of young experience of like, I look forward with my son to taking him to see children's theater in Houston. I think that would be great, and the added thrill of, probably knowing a lot of the people involved, and so there's some great theater for young people in the city, and that'll be really, but we didn't have any of that. So in 5th grade, we had and it was, again, a smallish college town, and we had a chorus teacher who decided we were going to do a little musical, and the musical was called George Washington and the Children from the Future, right? The winning masterpiece, George Washington and the Children from the Future. So it was this, so I fast forwarded till I'm about whatever age kids are when they're in 5th grade, like 10, 11, something like that, 11 maybe. The weird thing about it, the thing that makes it a sort of, I think, a kind of strange story in retrospect, is I was cast as George Washington, which as an adult, I know was a part for a teacher, and there was just not a teacher who would do it. So they gave it to the chatty kid, and I had a lot of lines. And I remember my friend Amanda Bingle and I, this is just a girl who lived the next block over. She was helping me run lines as like a 5th grader. And I remember having my first like really stressful, I probably had my first actor's nightmare dream as a 5th grader about this play, right? And I remember like asking my mom if I could call the chorus teacher, and I remember being allowed to, and I remember quitting, and then the next day at school being talked out of it, and like we really, you know, like we really need you in the part, and I'm like, the line load is ridiculous, and you know, like, you can do it. We'll find little cheats and we'll write a couple of them on a music stand. But it's also because I also couldn't sing, and I still can't. I wouldn't say that I'm tone deaf, but I can't carry a tune. And so George Washington also didn't sing. And so he meets these kids from like 1985 or whatever it was. And God, 1985 is a perfect year to dress kids up like they're from the future, right? You know, like it's the year from, you know, Back to the Future is from that year and everything. And so yeah, everybody was like a lot. I remember the girls in the class had a lot of neon scrunchies and hair going out like this, and the boys had, you know, kind of crazy costumes and stuff. And I had like powder in my hair that stuck to my scalp, like talcum powder that stuck to my scalp, and you know, like this white Einstein hair. They just don't cut your hair. So it did not evoke George Washington. It might have evoked Einstein a little bit. But so that was my first experience with the theater, and I remember hating it up until there was an audience, and then thinking it was fun. And then in middle school, nothing. Like we did, you know, like we didn't have, there was no middle school theater, and there was sort of no opportunity for it. So I just did other stuff, and I got involved in other clubs and activities. But then in freshman year of high school, we had a little drama club. And again, one of the things that I really love about my job at UH is we've got this summer program where theater teachers, you know, mostly some are English teachers, some are teach junior high, but the bulk of them are high school theater teachers, and a lot of them are from Texas. Some of them are out of state, and some of them are actually international. But one of the things I think is cool about theater in Texas is the way it's funded through the UIL system. You know, most schools of any size have a theater teacher. There's a theater arts teacher. We also have a BFA, you know, like not summer program, but a 4-year BFA in theater education. And actually right now is the time of year where I find out that a lot of them got their contracts. And so, you know, like a lot of our graduating seniors are like, and it's wonderful. Both programs are wonderful. And the reason I like them so much is that we didn't have anything like that. We had a very overworked English teacher, or at least, I don't know if she was overworked or not. I wasn't her boss. I was in 9th grade. Certainly came off as put upon, you know, like presented put uponness to the world. And a certain degree of, I don't want to be having to do this. But we did Midsummer Night's Dream in my freshman year of high school, and I got cast as Bottom. And I got to be funny. And you know, as y'all did a co-production of Midsummer with you ago, and there's something still so funny about at least some parts of that play. You know, like the Bottom with let me, you know, like how he wants to play every part. Like that's some jokes really don't last, but some jokes last for centuries. And like, let me play the lion too is just like, if you deliver it with even just a little bit of energy, it's hilarious, because this guy has no self-awareness that he's not good. And he's just been so excited to be in a play that he wants to do all of the parts. And that, you know, like that's just inherently funny. And so, and plus, even better, there's a bad play within the very good play. Like, so play. And then it has 𝗕𝗲𝗶𝘀𝗀 in it, which is like this great playwright writing this terrible play. And so you get to be in two plays. You get to be in a really good play, and then right near the end, you get to be in a bad play within a good play. And that was just that was really the thing. That was when and then so when I was looking at colleges, I didn't really know exactly what, and I was a high school senior. How, a lot of high school seniors don't know exactly what they want to do with their life professionally. But I knew I wanted to stay involved in theater. And I remember on college tours asking, do you have a drama club, or does the, if I'm not a theater major, can I still audition? I really thought I wanted to just be like a hobby actor while I figured out what I really wanted to do. And it wasn't until my junior year, or like right at I think the beginning of my junior year, I was taking a dramatic lit class because I was an English major at the time. And I ended up graduating with an English major and a theater major. But I read Endgame by Beckett and Homecoming by Pinter in the same week.
Wow.
And I still teach those two plays in the same week as a back-to-back. Partly because that's really the George Washington Children from the Future and the Midsummer were where I got an interest in theater. But where I decided to make it my profession was reading those two plays in a row and saying to myself, I don't know what these plays are about, but they're more exciting to me than anything I've read for a long time, because they're attracting me through their aesthetics and through a kind of mysterious quality where I feel like I could read these plays or see these plays over and over again, and they would not exhaust themselves, right? There would always be, and it's in a way, I guess, because I think of them as, masterpieces is kind of a crazy word and a problematic word, but they're, they bring me, and they're, again, I mentioned Will, a while ago, like Realistic Joneses, which, and y'all's production was so beautiful a couple of years ago. That's another one that I come back to, and I'm like, I don't think I'll ever get to the bottom of this one, and I don't think that's the point, right? And so there's certain plays that have an elusiveness and an interesting thing they're doing with language, because again, I kind of came to theater as a reader more than anything else originally. And so there was something, I was like, okay, these two plays, Endgame and Homecoming, I was like, this is more exciting than any novel I've ever read. For me, just for what I want out of things. And I was like, so, and I immediately started talking to the head of the theater program to say, how did you end up with what's a PhD in theater, and how does somebody get a job like your job? And so my junior year was very much dedicated to, and actually maybe that class happened in my sophomore year for the chronology of it, because by the time I got to be, so I think actually I got bitten by the bug my sophomore year, because they let me, I was a really small school. It was a college called 𝗕𝗲𝗶𝘀𝗀𝗏 College in central New York State, really, really small. There were only 2 theater professors in the department, for what it's worth. And I think now there are 3, but they let me direct Endgame in the fall of my junior year.
Nice.
And I wouldn't say I did it well, but they let me do it. And it was, that's a great age. Like 20 years old is a great age, I think, to be obsessed by some work of art, right? Some musician or some painter or filmmaker. It's a great age for obsession and going really, really deep into a thing. Not that any age is bad for that, but that's a really good age for it, right? So, and I remember so the ham was played by the chair of the math department, who was like a local community theater actor, and he was like, I would love to be in that play, and nobody's ever going to ask me otherwise, and again, until I moved to Minneapolis for grad school, I was never in a theater city, so I was always like making theater and never like seeing that much of it. Although we did go to the Stratford Festival and saw some stuff in New York, and eventually did a study abroad in London also. But this was just the age when I was also starting to see good theater. I remember like, and Claude was my college best friend, and we're still very tight. And he's actually 2 summers ago, he and another college friend of mine, they flew out. They both live in the East Coast. They flew out just to see the Shakespeare Festival, because they don't, like, we all did theater together in college. No, they don't do theater professionally. And so I was like in our little friend group, I was the one who still like does theater and does it professionally. So like, yeah, we'll just come see it. And we can go backstage. I'm like, of course you can go backstage. You can stand in the wing while I do the curtain speech. You could, like, and so like, and once in a while, like I'll see like my college friends, Bill or Susie, like a Facebook post or make a cut from like one of the HSF actors. And I'm like, how do you all know each other? I'm like, oh, because y'all flew out and I introduced you. That's how you know each other. But yeah, so on the Endgame thing, I remember my friend Bill, who was playing Claude, we had like, there's a bit late in the play where he goes around and he picks up a lot of the detritus from the stage. And we had like just like an old, just like whatever really super antique-y prop. Like we had a little oil can and like a fork or something. And he's just kind of gathering stuff up. And he dropped it like one time. And it landed like bang, ting, ting, bang. And like in a particular way. And I'm like, oh, I love the way that landed. And like, this is me being like director guy, or faking it until I made it, right? And I'm like, ooh, okay. Next time and just like in retrospect, super awful and pretentious, and like a total, like a 20-year-old. But I was like, okay, so you have to make sure that you drop the stuff the same way every night. and so like, it's not good directing, but it was paying like a tremendous amount of careful attention to something. And I think like that to me is the core of learning. Like it doesn't matter that much if it's a Shakespeare play or a Beckett play or a Susan Lloyd Parks play or whatever it is. Like just paying really focused, extended attention to something and going deep, deep, deep down that hole for a while. I think you kind of teach yourself how to learn. And so by the end of that play, even though it wasn't, in fact, it was adjudicated for something called the American College Theater Festival. Yeah. And there was a professor from NYU who came up and watched it, like a directing professor, and probably somebody with way more credentials than anybody who taught me in undergrad. And at the end of it, it's like they give you some notes and they give you some feedback, and she was lovely about the whole thing and really professional, and gave good notes to the designer and good notes to the actors, and was talking to me, and here were some things that I thought were interesting. And then gave me a note that was just like, and for somebody who like, I like to think I have an okay sense of humor, but she said, many people find a degree of humor in the works of Samuel Beckett. And I was like, I was just barely mature enough to get the brilliance of that note and how it was delivered, which is like, like there was so much in that, which was like, like God love you, young man. You clearly love this play, and you strangled it to death, like Lenny in Of Mice and Men, by loving it so much and treating it like a masterpiece that you squeezed everything out of it that's at all funny or delightful or the part of it that makes it a tragic comedy, right? I made it so serious. And so I came out of that being like, oh yeah, the paradox of it's interesting. The fact that it is so funny while it's still unequivocally about the end of the world and wanting to end and wanting to die. And it's both. And it's so that idea really, I think the first sense that I had of I could be a person who could write a play or direct a play or give people guidance on how to write a play or be involved in, like developing the world of a play, as I discovered what dramaturgy was. I didn't discover that until I got to grad school. It's funny to me that I teach classes in dramaturgy, and it's part of like what my faculty description is I'm professor of theater history, playwriting, and dramaturgy. And I got to grad school never even hearing the word dramaturgy, but But all of that is part of just taking incredibly seriously what it is that we're making, to the point that the seriousness has room for how funny things can be. Like I was doing some dramaturgy work on the Alley's digital season this year, and so I was the lead dramaturg for Medea and for Enemy of the People, and in particular, Enemy of the People, like it was so much fun to realize that play's funny. You know, that the humor sometimes comes from the place that really most, I think, humor comes from, which is the difference between the way somebody sees themselves and the way everybody else sees them. And Ibsen is chock-a-block with characters who have a very specific self-conception, and everybody else thinks of them, that's really not how we see you, you know?
That's great. That is a great, we had a comedy class at Juilliard, and so there were some observations made like that. But I remember one day, Robin Williams, who went to Juilliard for a while, came and talked to the school, and he actually tried out some jokes, and then he talked a little bit, and then he took questions. And somebody from the department started a question to him, going, well, in comedy class we learned, and he went, comedy class? You have a class? And he goes, this is a rubber chicken. He was astounded that there was actually a class.
Right.
But I mean, you know, your observation is a good one, and studying why something is funny was what we were doing in that class. It's like, you know, the old thing, like if somebody slips on a banana peel, is it funny? Well, depends on what they do after they slip on the banana peel, right?
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it's how you try and catch yourself is what's funny. It's not the falling, it's the trying not to fall when falling is inevitable.
And looking up to see if anyone notices.
Yeah. So like slipping on the banana peel is like, you can break it down a couple of ways. Like loss of dignity is funny, and like a sweet old lady slipping on the banana peel is not nearly as funny as like some king of something slipping on a banana peel, right?
There you go.
Like some or some, like some person who takes themselves incredibly seriously. That's why it's funny when cats fall down, right? Because they don't appear to have a lot of sense of humor. Like when a cat like wipes out and then tries to get dignity back, that's funny. Because it's a way of breaking through the seriousness of how they think of themselves. So that's funny. But then on a physical level, there's this guy who wrote an essay 121 years ago called his name's 𝗕𝗲𝗶𝘀. He's a French philosopher, and he had this idea that one of the things that becomes funny about people physically is he was kind of this mystical 𝗕𝗲𝗶𝘀 French philosopher, like stuff right at the end of the 19th century in philosophy. A lot of it got really weird and metaphysical and spiritual, and Bergson was part of that. And so he had this idea that we all had this sort of vital energy, he called it the élan vital. We all have this sort of like life energy flowing through us as living things. Animals have it and humans have it. And on the realm of physical comedy, so there's if you're just moving how you normally move, it's not that funny, like if you're walking down the street, that's not funny. But if for some reason there's a blockage in the flow of the vital energy, and we become less like a fluid living thing and more like a machine. This is a very late 19th century sort of machine age thought, but that becomes funny. So think about John Cleese in the Department of Silly Walks sketch from Monty Python, right? There's something. It's both exaggerated, but it's also not fluid. There's little hitches and breaks, and there's a weird sort of like crazy machine quality to it. He's more like a crane than he is a person walking the way one would walk to get from point A to point B. And so the banana peel slip, it's really, I think it's as much the upper body as anything, right? It's what the hands do and the face does,
Yeah.
right? It's the attempt to invent a machine in the air that will stop you from falling is funny, and it's the futility of that.
That's great. That's good.
So Rob, we unbelievably,
I know.
we've gotten to the
Oh
point.
yeah, we're almost out of time. Yeah.
Most of the time.
One thing we didn't tell you is when we say goodbye, because it's Zoom, it's goodbye. We don't get to sit around and talk about how
I
great
know.
we were. You'll be.
Yeah. Oh, that's fine. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Is there anything, we sent you a list of questions, or is there, anything that we haven't talked about that you were like, God, I hope I get this in?
Talk
And
about it.
if
Yeah.
now it's time, because now it's their
Now's the
last chance,
time.
man.
Gosh.
No.
You asked me about mentor, and then you
yeah.
asked,
Yeah.
was there one thing or said or taught you that sticks with you? So this is not even close to a person I would be able to call a mentor, only because this was a one afternoon session, right? So I mentioned that briefly a while ago that I did a study. I did study abroad in England in undergrad, and so we had different master classes with folks, and so we got a chance to. Baby's crying.
That's
There you
okay.
go. Well,
My
perfect.
wife's with him. He's okay. So we got a chance to have an afternoon working with Fiona Shaw, who of course I think is one of the great. And this is around like when she had done her landmark Medea, right? This is that era in her career where again, we think of her as one of the, like one of the great stage actors, largely because of that
Medea.
role in that production, and it was such an incredible and important performance of that play, and I think broke open that play in new ways and made that play new again in a lot of ways. So so she was asked by somebody else in my class that day, like, is there some advice, or is there and she talked about practice. And she talked about practice in a really interesting way, which is that essentially everything in your life can be viewed as practice for something. That if you are sitting around stewing and being angry every day, then you are practicing anger. If you are kind to people in a regular reflexive way, then you are practicing kindness. If you are reading regularly, you are practicing reading. If you are, and she said, you basically, and I remember being like sort of charmed by the bad grammar of it. She's like, so you've got to practice what you want to be good at. And that's something that really stuck with me and still does. And I repeat it now and then.
Great. That's very good advice.
And I do think that that is not at all antithetical to living in the moment.
No.
Because I think there's a way you could interpret that to make it all like everything is always still in the future and everything like everything's a rehearsal. And I don't think that's what she means. I think that it's a lesson about how to spend your daily time.
Yeah.
And so I think that's I think that's really important. And since the baby was born, my wife and I, before we go to bed, we share our gratitude for the day. We say, we just spend time, and it's it's 5 minutes, and we just sort of say, I'm grateful for this today, and I'm grateful for that today, and that's a way of practicing. For us being grateful for what life we have, and so and it's, you're allowed to be grateful for the baby every day, and you're allowed to be and
for each other.
And you're allowed to be grateful for each other. You're allowed to repeat, right? You say every day for 50 years, and it's equally true. And that's again, I've had many mentors, some for many years and some for only one little nugget that stuck with me, but that's one way I would answer that question.
That's a great answer. That's a wonderful way to finish this. I think a beautiful little piece of advice and life wisdom to leave people with.
I loved it.
From your beautiful sharing of everything, so much knowledge, which I'm so glad that we had you, because I knew you'd be really fun and exciting and have a lot of wonderful things to share with people. And of course, you did not disappoint as usual. I always love spending time with you, Rob.
Yeah.
And
thanks
also-
for your time and the time that you give to Fourth Wall Theater.
Yes,
and-
that you are on our advisory board. and you
I
do-
love moderating the talkbacks after the shows.
Well, we love having you with us. So
That'll happen again.
yeah, and it means a lot to me being a U of H alumni too. So that is very, very wonderful that you give some time to us. So, but we are going to let everybody go. We're going to wrap up. We're so grateful, and please give your beautiful wife Lisa our love and that beautiful baby, and enjoy yourself. And thank you for joining us. All right,
Yeah.
good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us at Fourth Wall.
Good night,
Bye
Rob.
bye.
Beyond the Fourth Wall is produced by Fourth Wall Theater Company, Houston's home for extraordinary performances up close. Each guest is paid for their appearance on this series, in accordance with our mission to pay artists a living wage. Follow the links in the video description to support Fourth Wall with a tax-deductible gift, or to subscribe to our upcoming 10th anniversary season.
I was very tired all day Saturday, but it's sometimes hard to distinguish what is tiredness from being the parent of a 6-month-old and what is tiredness of anything else.
Oh, Rob.
Exactly.